Hello everybody, Thomas Fleming here. Well, you wouldn't know that this is almost May. It feels like October or November. It's cold, we have another storm front going today. Pretty much it started sometime in the middle of the night and it's been going all day. We got a little bit of a gap, but the storm is still out there. It's missing us just by a little bit. And it's going to keep coming, and there are storm effects on radar all the way back to Texas. So this is supposed to run through tomorrow. And tomorrow's moving day as I'm recording this, so I'm delighted. I've done it before, I'll do it again. It's just part of the job. Satan seems to figure out he can get a storm in on my moving day. He's in charge of the world, remember? All right. Doesn't affect me. I'll keep working. We've had a couple of heavy-duty videos, so I'm just going to make this one a light one for tomorrow's moving day. Well, it's probably going to come out on Saturday. I'm working Saturday, too, by the way, on another film, so I've got to get a video recorded for it. So I guess this is what this one's going to be. And since I'm filming, I'm going to make this one about filming. If we think about all the films that we've grown up with or watched over the years, they've done a pretty good job through, and I really love science fiction. They've done a pretty good job of predicting the future. Now, not willfully predicting as a prophet would do, but just somebody looking at the way the world is and what it would be like if we, advanced. There was an old weekly TV show, I don't remember the name. It was narrated by Walter Cronkite. That's the way it is. If you know who he is, great. If you don't worry. He's gone. But the show basically went and showed you what the house of the future would be like. There was no dishwasher. When you finished your plate, you threw it into a disintegrator, and it would basically eat it up, take up all the trash, put that out in another brick of trash when they take it outside, and then when you wanted a new plate, it would just form you a new plate. So there were no real big cabinets. You didn't need cabinets to hold all the stuff because you made them as you need them. It didn't take long. There was a lot of things that they had that were dreamy, not practical, but just fun to watch. To look at our current times, my favorite movie is a British movie called Fahrenheit 451. Fahrenheit 451 is the temperature at which paper burns. And in this futuristic look at the world was burning books that talked about freedom, talked about, doing things on your own. The world government didn't want anybody to have any thoughts of anything else other than what they were telling them to do. And their firemen of the day went around in a fire truck. And they wore these funny little hats, and they'd ring the bell, and they'd have sirens, and they'd pull up to the house that doesn't have a fire, and their firemen would run inside and search for books, pile them on the front lawn, light them on fire. And they knew how to look for books. They looked for paperbacks and toasters, and they'd pull down ceilings and all this stuff. They were experts at finding books and burning them. Now, we're not there yet, but I can imagine that they would. The problem they've got is computers have all the books on them now, so they're going to have to restrict the access. It's easier than burning books. But let's look at some of the other movies that I grew up with. I don't know about you. I'm going to put my glasses on so I can read my notes. Charlton Heston in Soylent Green. The population is so crazy And they have no food left for anybody. This is our government destroying all of our food. Our government wants us to eat bugs. Well, they know that's impractical. But John the Baptist lived on wild honey and locusts, so it's doable. Not pleasant to most. I have eaten pretty much all the general bugs that all these survival guys will eat. But Soylent Green, when people die, they were actually grinding them up and serving them as a meal back to the people again. Okay, so that's an interesting take on the future, and we're kind of going to be doing something like that as well as our 451. Let's see. The Time Machine. Rod Taylor starred in that, and I don't remember the names of the actors that starred in Fahrenheit 451, but The Time Machine. The garden sequences where the ivy was and all this stuff, if you remember the movie, that was filmed at UCLA. And the rest of it, the big city there, the dead city, a lot of that's matte painting. Models were used on the volcanic stuff. And The Time Machine is well recognizable, and even a copy of it made it on The Big Bang Theory. But that showed how man can degenerate. The people that survived underground became the masters somehow, because they got away from the radiation, and they bred the people that lived above ground for food. Yeah. We could get to something like that, but we don't have to worry about it because we know the end. If we were left alone, these could happen. I put on here War of the Worlds because we were invaded by aliens, and there's all this talk about aliens. They want to use this fake rhetoric that when the Christians disappear, they must have been abducted by aliens. It's been a common thread. My question to those that have seen aliens, now there's a difference between a UFO and aliens. A UFO just means there's something up there that you cannot identify what it is. It could be a test vehicle from another government or including our own, Area 51 story that was out there. The government put it to good use because that way if you ever saw something that they were testing, you just say it was an alien and they'd laugh it off. But they need to have some excuse for all the people disappearing. We used to watch all these movies, Invasion from Mars and Venus Needs Men, or some of these crazy movies that they had back then. Well, we know now that you can't live on these, at least humans can't, and not without a major city that you've built that is radiation proof, has a containment of atmosphere. I guess the closest to it would be the movie Total Recall, where they couldn't go outside, but they built these things. I'm assuming that all that glass that they had was made of something that would block the cosmic rays. I don't recommend the movie necessarily because it has a lot of violence and sex in it, but it does kind of give you some ideas of what the future could look like if we were to try to go to Mars. I don't think we're going to get there because Musk is saying we're still 2 or 3 years away. So if that's the case, they may get to the moon first, but I don't think we're going to be here in that amount of time. The movie 2001, the original one, Space Odyssey, they had video phones. They weren't real back then. They didn't have them. But they were planning on them, and we got to see them used. Nowadays, they'd be, commonplace. Star Trek. We got to see the first handheld communication device. The very first Motorola phone, their clamshell phone, was designed to have the part open up like Star Trek. They deliberately made it look like a Star Trek phone to a degree. It was a little bit bigger and bulkier because they didn't have the technology like we do now to shrink it into something small. And there was no screen. I mean, it was, what popped out was the speaker. And I have a model that one of my friends made that is the original Star Trek communicator. A copy of it, where the gold screen pops up. You got your dials on it. So I have one of those. I, of course, have the new ones. We use them in filming a lot. What else do we have in the way of our movies? We have the Terminator. I'll be back. AI going crazy. Skynet. Like I said, they're never going to become sentient. They're never going to be thinking along the line of humans the way we think. Well, we could get them to the point of being like an animal. An animal can think and make decisions. They just have limited choices that they know about, and they have limited things that they can do. Now, we can give them more things to do because we can build robots, put the AI in them, and they can be, have hands like we do. You can't get a dog who can be very well trained, come over here and sit, and they come over here and sit. Some of them try to teach them how to go get a beer out of the refrigerator. That's a little bit more difficult. But you can teach animals to do basic tricks. And I think we're going to see that level of AI coming out here soon. It has to do with programming power. We can program, trillions of lines of code. You can't tell the difference between a human and that. Just look at ChatGPT and some of the other ones. Musk is concerned because these things will not be sentient. They're going to be programmed. How are we going to program them? Are we going to be programming them to be nice and friendly servants? Or are we going to be programming them to be cops working for an elite group of people who don't like people? They don't like the world. They want 80% of the world to die off. That's not coming from God. That's coming from Satan. Satan wants everybody dead. If he can help instigate a AI type environment, there could be hidden code in there that says kill every human being. Of course, God's not going to let it happen. We know that. But that isn't going to stop him from trying. He hasn't stopped trying over these many, many thousands and thousands of years. God has been dealing with him from the beginning. And he's still here. He was there in the Garden of Eden. He's always been around, and he's always had it out for man. And he's not going to quit. Good thing he doesn't know the Bible. Because God basically tells us. All right, what else we got? Star Wars, a kind of a... kind of alludes to a spiritual warfare. You have the good force and the bad force. May the force be with you. We're kind of in that situation now. Although we don't have lightsabers. I have a prop lightsaber, but I don't have a real one. So we're not quite there yet. But the idea that good versus evil is going on all the time. And even if I'm not fighting evil right at this moment, it's going on out there someplace. There is a battle going on somewhere against good and evil. Good will always win if you're working with Jesus. If you're on your own, bad will always win. So the only way to take on this battle is to be with Jesus. Period. All right. The movie when they went to Mars was Total Recall. I forgot the name of that. I just remembered. And we have other things, other movies. I love watching, The Day the Earth Stood Still. Their alien looked human. They still shot him. But he did what he had to do. He warned the Earth, don't get out into space unless you learn to be nice to people. And the big robot, that was a thing to see. It's all rubberized material. There was a person inside, obviously. I don't remember the saying that they said to stop the robot. I should. Gort was his name. Barada Nikto, I don't remember the first part. And it's not a satanic phrase. People keep trying to put stuff on there like that. They just made up the words so that it would sound alien. There's a whole other line of movies that are out there that are dealing with our current times. In our current times, we need a savior. Now, we're well aware of that, but the rest of the world isn't. So they create saviors in any way, shape, and form. I mean, that's what all the Marvel hero movies are about. The savior can be human, like Tony Stark, or they can be alien, or they can be a hybrid like the Hulk. But they're just trying to give the world what they're asking for, a superhero to come in and save the day. Well, we've got one coming. And technically, we're going to come with him when he comes back. I'm getting some questions about, is there a rapture and a second coming? I've been told there's only one. You have to understand that there are two different events. We have a rapture event, and I'm full into pre-trib, and we have a second coming. The second coming is at the end, when it's all over. He doesn't come down here until he's ready to kill off the bad guys and start the millennium. But there's a rapture up front to protect his bride. If you read Revelation 12, Satan's going to come down to try to attack. God's going to protect us. Matthew 24, and the same story in Mark and Luke. Jesus is in the Olivet, he's teaching the Olivet Discourse. I'm being distracted again. There's people walking down over there. Squirrel. He's giving them the Olivet Discourse. He's telling them when they asked him, what are the signs of the times? When are you coming back, essentially? So he's talking to his Jewish followers about a Jewish prophecy. Remember, they don't have the New Testament, so they don't have the book of Revelation yet. So you got to go back to Isaiah and Daniel and Ezekiel. You got to get the prophets out there. Jesus liked Isaiah the most, but he's telling them about his second coming. They're not looking for an easy out, which is what the rapture happens to be. We don't need to be convinced that Jesus is right. We've already made that decision. These people weren't even 100% behind him when they followed him around. Of course, they didn't have the Spirit yet. We have the Spirit. They didn't. So they kind of waffle back and forth. Peter was a good example of that. But he's teaching them about his second coming. They want to know, when are you going to come back and kick these Romans out of here? They're bad to us. We don't like it. Jesus didn't pick a peaceful time to come to the earth. He could have. He could have taken care of the Romans before he came down. But he was coming back that time as the Lamb of God, to be slain, his blood spilt for us, his sacrifice for us. That's why he came back. They didn't get that. The Jews that were in charge certainly didn't get it. And Satan didn't get it, or he would have blocked it. We are getting some modern movies that I like. The one I've talked about in the past is the movie called Before the Wrath. It's narrated by Kevin Sorbo, and it has a lot of our pastors that we're familiar with in it. J.D. Farag's in it, Jan Markell's in it, Jack Hibbs is in it, I think. It tells the story of a Galilean wedding and how it parallels the biblical times. And most of these guys, if not, well, most of them were Galilean. There's a few that were not, but the original ones, the first ones that Jesus, come be fishers of men with me, they were Galilean fishermen living on the Sea of Galilee. So that's a good movie. I like the new series, The Chosen. Be careful of it, but I haven't seen anything I dislike so far. But I haven't seen the whole series. It's produced by the Mormons, but they believe in Jesus and the Bible as long as it matches their other book written by, what's his name? I'm terrible with names. I just came up with that and I didn't have his name ready. But the founder of the Mormon religion. He's doing the same thing that the early Jews did. The Bible's no good unless you have this commentary book with it. Jews had the Talmud and the Mishnah, their commentaries. Over the years, they were written, a line or two or a sentence or a paragraph was added by priests over the years to these. So they became a collection of comments trying to explain the Old Testament. That's why they didn't recognize Jesus, because they'd been living with a wrong interpretation of the scriptures. You go back to the source if you don't trust it. Okay, I think that's it for now. There are, other modern movies. We have a Left Behind series. LaHaye put that together. We've been trying to understand the Bible, trying to create images of it. We have, the grand epic, the Ten Commandments. Cecil B. DeMille. Thousands of people cast for that in some of the big fighting scenes out in the desert. Charlton Heston would tell a story, and I've heard him tell it in person. Well, if I hold on to the reins this way, and if I do this, I can get a better angle. And Cecil B. DeMille says, don't worry, I guarantee you're going to win. Just hold on and don't fall out of it. He's trying to put too much into his character. And the parting of the waters, that's Hollywood at its best. It's wrong, but that's Hollywood, the way they showed it. But I love that part of that story. It shows how God can work through people. But it also shows with the snakes, for instance, with the snakes, he throws his snake down, or his staff down, it turns into a snake. The magicians for the Pharaoh, they throw their staffs down, and they turn into snakes too. So people can do the things of Satan. Satan has power on this earth to copy. The difference being Moses' snake ate their snakes. That's the difference. But they can copy. Satan can copy what's going on. And he does quite a bit. And it's going to get to the point where you're going to see, well, I don't know if we're going to see, we may not be here, But the world's going to see a lot of miracles. Satan's going to pour out all this stuff to back up his false Christ. He will have power. There's only going to be two people that oppose him. And they could stop him if they wanted to, but they basically get their message out, and that's what the main point is. And then God lets the Antichrist kill him. And then to show that he's going to one-up the Antichrist, God resurrects him after 3 days, and they go flying up into heaven. Another type of rapture. Okay. I did have a couple of verses I did want to throw out here. I'm not going to read them. But take a look at 1 Thessalonians 4, 16 through 17. Paul is talking about the rapture. There's a difference in the way Jesus comes to the earth. For the rapture, he comes to the clouds, and we are gathered up to him in the clouds. That's a total different picture than when he comes for the second coming, when he comes with an army of saints. Some say it's an army of angels. Read Jude 1, 14 and 15. He's coming with saints. We're the saints. We're going up in the rapture, and we're going to come back down as part of his army. And we're going to rule with an iron fist during the millennium, which matches the Revelation 12 rapture. Matthew has a different image. You can look at Matthew 25:31. So we know that there are different events. Matthew is written to the Jews. Paul in Thessalonians was writing to the Gentiles, which can include Jews. I was listening to somebody yesterday talking about it, and they asked a question: how come when a Jew becomes a Christian, they're no longer a Jew? Well, that's not true, but that's the way the world thinks sometimes. Jews are Jews. If you're related and you know that, or if you're proselytized and you become a Jew and you go to temple and you do all the things, I got started in that. I never finished because I became a Christian. They're Jews, but if you accept Christ, the world calls them Messianic Jews. They're still Jews, but they're Christians and Jews. Whereas if they're not Christian, they're simply Jews. They're the chosen people, but they've got to accept Christ, or they're not going to live forever in heaven. It doesn't matter if you're chosen. If you refuse to do what is necessary, then you don't get to partake in the good stuff. We have a wedding feast coming, and I don't believe it's right after the rapture. I think it's at the end. You can argue, it doesn't matter. We'll find out together. All right. I hope this light look at things, and you can go back and rent these movies and see them online. Have fun with them. Laugh at them. The War of the Worlds has one of my personal funny lines. Is that Gene Barry? I think it is, in that one. They've got the first spaceship rock, hot, molten, in the hole where it landed. They're standing next to it. Somebody says, hey, there's something in your truck, whatever it was, that's ticking. And he walks over to it and he picks it up and he goes, it's a Geiger counter. We're doing some prospecting. There's no uranium in the Los Angeles mountains, but anyhow, it had to fit the movie. So he's got his Geiger counter and he puts it over to the satellite and it's ticking more. And somebody says, well, if it's radioactive, shouldn't we get away from it? And his character goes, yeah, probably be a good idea. They didn't know. We know now that radiation is very deadly. But back then they didn't know. So I think that's a funny line that they've got in there. And the other one that I like is one more movie I just thought of. I like Independence Day. And there's an ad-lib line in there that I like. That's a funny line. I was thinking about funny lines. When Will Smith is dragging the alien across the desert, and I don't know what it was. They said that there was something around there that smelled really bad. That wasn't the alien. That's just a prop. He's dragging it along, and he turns and goes, "What's that smell?" And he kicks the alien. That was an ad-lib because he was just tired and frustrated because it was hot out there, and it was a long day probably. They film long days. That was an ad-lib. What's that smell? Something out there. Maybe something died that was upwind. I don't know. They left it in because it fit the scene. All right, and they used modern terminology in that one because it's a fairly modern movie. I don't know what heaven's going to look like. We get all kinds of images of it on our TV screens and movie screens. It's just people's imagination, but we have no idea. But the God that created all this stuff behind me is the one that's going to create the new heaven and earth. I trust him. Not only with the new heaven and earth, but I trust him with my life. All right. You have a blessed day. I think this is coming out on Saturday when I'm filming, so we're doing that. I can keep my hair the way it is. I didn't want to take my hat off because I've had this on. It's still cold. We're not going to get any sun today. We're overcast. I'm glad it hasn't rained while I'm here because I got to walk back to my tent. So I got to wrap this up so I don't get rained on. Next month I'm going to go up to Kentucky to do another film, and I have to color my hair because I'm doing a Klingon. Remember, in the original Star Trek, Klingons were the bad guys, but then we got together with them and realized we weren't that much different. And so that's why in Next Generation, one of the officers is a Klingon, Worf. Okay. Have fun. Think good thoughts. Don't let the devil in. He's looking for cracks in your armor. When in doubt, turn to God every time. Don't hesitate. Till we meet in the clouds, the rapture clouds.